Hey guys, it's Ben from the Strength Factory, and on today's episode of Factory Knowledge, I'm going to talk to you about why I think an e-bike might just be the #1 training tool for mountain bike and motocross racers. Whether you love them or hate them, it seems like e-bikes are here to stay. And personally, I love riding them. They're just another bike that I'm lucky enough to ride, but ultimately, I still prefer my normal push bike that I have to pedal along, okay? But these are a lot of fun, and I think they offer up a lot of really interesting training opportunities, which is why we're seeing more and more pro riders using them for training for motocross, for mountain bike, and that's both downhill and enduro, as well as just trail riders who like to mix things up a bit. So I'm going to run through some of the reasons now why I think they're so positive for training and how you can go about using yours effectively if you've got one. The #1 thing that makes an e-bike such a valuable training tool is just the amount of control you have over how much work you do. Anyone who says that e-bikers are lazy doesn't understand that actually you can work just as hard on this as you can on any bike. You can max out your heart rate, you can do intervals, you can do all of that, but what you can also do on this is whilst you're off-road, you can ride incredibly easily. You put it in the highest power mode so you get the most assistance, and you can get up most things at a low intensity. And that's important because we don't always want to do all of our work at high intensities. And anyone who's followed me for a while or watched any of my videos knows how much I believe in building an aerobic base, okay? And how I also believe in proper recovery between intense training sessions. So let's take today myself as an example. It's a Monday. Yesterday, I didn't have loads of time, but I got an hour and a half in. I went quite hard on the mountain bike because conditions are prime and the kids were asleep. I've got to take it, okay? Felt pretty good. And then today, this morning, I did a pretty hard training session in the gym. Now, I've come out now to film this, but actually, if I wasn't filming, I'd just be riding because it's late October and it's dry and the trails are amazing right now. And in between filming, I'm going to ride. And if I was on my normal mountain bike, that ride is quite tough around here. The hills are quite steep. On this, I can go out, even though I've trained like 2 days in a row, and I can go out for an hour or two in the afternoon in the highest power mode, and I can stay aerobic, or I can stay even below that in that recovery zone. So I'm out, I'm enjoying myself, I'm improving my skills, I'm getting some recovery work done and all of that. And you just can't do that on a normal mountain bike. Following on from that idea of having control over your intensity and how hard you're working, I mean, the only other place we can really get that is actually on an indoor bike or turbo trainer, where you can go as easy or as hard as you like, okay? You just use the resistance and then the amount of effort you put in. But you can't achieve that on a road bike unless you live somewhere really flat, in which case maybe you can. And you certainly can't achieve it on the mountain bike, especially in winter when the trails get really claggy and slow and draggy. And as soon as it kicks up steep and technical, heart rate is through the roof, which is fine. We want that sometimes. But if you don't want that, an e-bike is a really great option. Now, as well as thinking recovery, you know, we can do specific work on the e-bike just like you can any other bike. So I can do aerobic base training, except I don't have to wear Lycra and do it on the road. I can do it in the woods, and guess what? I can get a shitload of descending in, which is good for my skills, my upper body strength, and just good for developing that speed, whether you're a racer or not. The next thing to think about is actually the weight of the e-bike. Now this, ironically, is quite a light e-bike. It's one of the lightest ones out there, but on the whole, e-bikes are big, heavy lumps, okay? And add to that, you're doing more descending, and guess what? You're doing a lot of work, in particular in the upper body. And so for you mountain bike racers, whether it's downhill or enduro, riding this heavy bike and doing more descending, it's going to be really good for strengthening that upper body, as well as things like toughening up the hands and grip, thinking maybe towards racing or summer trips away. For the motocross riders out there, it's more similar to a motocross bike than a normal mountain bike, but it's not going to pull your arms off. You're at lower risk, obviously when you're riding it compared to a motocross bike, and it beats you up less than going and riding a track on the motocross bike. Okay, it's just going to put less abuse into your upper body while still getting some useful cross training. Over here in the UK, it's actually just coming through autumn, and it's not long before the night's going to be dark, the trail's going to be wet, and it's just going to be cold and miserable the whole time. And that is when it's really easy to jack on yourself and not go riding and not go training. And that's where, to be fair, a lot of people retreat into the garage on turbo trainers. But I'm not really into that, okay? It doesn't really work for me. And so for me, this is where the e-bike comes in. Because if you've only got an hour, I don't know what it is in the psychology, but ask any e-biker and they'll tell you, if you've only got an hour in the winter when it's cold, dark and wet and muddy, you're more likely to go out if you've got an e-bike than without. Because if you're going to go to all that effort of getting cold and wet and muddy, if you're going to go to all that effort of getting all the kit on and sorting out afterwards, then on my normal bike, I'd come up here to these woods and maybe get 2 runs in, yeah? Come on this, maybe I'll get 6 runs in, okay? And all of a sudden, all that effort, that hour, you know, of getting cold, wet and muddy becomes a lot more worth it. I think that's a big part of what the e-bike offers you, is that on those days or those dark nights, is that you're more likely to get out riding. And it's not just me who says this, like everyone I know who rides e-bikes, they just say for some reason, when it's all muddy and shitty, you still go out riding. And that, in my mind, can only be a good thing, no matter what type of rider you are, whether it's mountain bike, motocross, whether you're racing or just doing it for fun. If you're riding more, then you're improving. Something else I think an e-bike is great for developing your skills, is that all of a sudden, I'm doing technical climbs, okay? Like, it doesn't look like much because the camera flattens it, but this is the start of a really sustained section of like technical climbing. And on my normal mountain bike, I might do it a couple of times over the summer, like when it's dry, but I very rarely do it in the winter. But then, as soon as you're here on the e-bike, it just makes a bit more sense. And I find myself doing technical climbing way more on the e-bike than I did before. And whilst you might think, oh, I'm only interested in going down the hill, it's all skills, okay? And it all goes into like what I call the riding vocabulary, which is doing as many different things on bikes as possible, whether it's technical climbs or trials or jibs or downhill or uplift, whatever it is, okay? It all adds together to give you the best balance, the best skills, okay? And they all cross over to mountain bike and motocross and racing, okay? So this little number here is really tricky on any bike, even the e-bike, and yet I find myself repeatedly doing it on the e-bike. Just make sure you're not that dick who's riding your e-bike up the downhill trail. Something else I think an e-bike lends itself really well to is actually sessioning something. In this case, a corner, okay, on my local trails. Now, those of you who've been following me for a while, and my athletes definitely know about this, so I'm always banging on about it, will know that the key to actually improving your skills and developing and truly becoming faster is deliberate practice. So it's not just running through the motions and just doing endless rides and things like that. It's going out, trying to improve yourself, okay, on your own or with a group of friends or riding buddies. Now, the e-bike, why does that make it easier? Well, for a start, you know, if I want to session this corner, I start up there and I end up down there. On the e-bike, I'm just going to monster truck through all the brush, through the woods, all the broken sticks and foliage, back to the top. I'm not going to be that tired, and it's quick. The alternative is to either pedal back up the track, which is fine today probably because it's dead quiet. On a weekend, I wouldn't be able to do that. Or push my bike up the slope here if I was on my enduro bike. And frankly, the e-bike sounds like a lot better option to do that, okay? So straight away, it means you're more likely to do it in the first place because it makes it easier to do it. And in a given amount of time, I can hit this corner maybe 3 times as many times, okay? So I've got more opportunity to develop my skill, to develop my race speed. That ultimate top speed is what I'm looking for as a racer. So there you go. That's some of my thoughts then about why an e-bike is an amazing tool for training, for motocross, for enduro, for downhill, and for general mountain bike use. Now, I don't want to say you've got to have an e-bike. I'm not saying that. You don't have to run out and spend 5, 6, 7 grand on an e-bike. A lot of you don't want one, you don't need one, you don't have space one, and that's cool. If you do want one, if you have been thinking about it, then I think that the things I've talked about today are quite compelling. You know, if you want to get better on your bike, no matter what sort of bike it is, I think an e-bike is a really useful part of that picture, okay? For building up that riding vocabulary, for getting more bike time to develop your skills and so on. It's not perfect. I mean, you go out for a ride in the winter and you can get absolutely covered in wet and mud, and you've got loads of admin to do, just like a normal bike or just like a motocross bike. Whereas obviously you ride a road bike or a turbo trainer, for instance, and there's no admin, maybe some sweaty kit to wash, and that's it. So there's pros and cons, just like with everything. It's about using the right tool for the right job. But I think, on the whole, if you've got readily accessible trails that you can ride to get short rides in, and if you're really interested in developing your speed on the bike, then an e-bike is where it's at.